it now seems that from that perspective, there are thousands of potential Archduke Ferdinand pathways and vectors that you and I can't even predict. But how likely are we going to navigate diplomatically this minefield in coming months?
Wow, Nate, I don't, I have a really hard time seeing how we get out of this one. The U.S. has really painted itself into a set of rhetorical corners here, and I, particularly in the Middle East, you know, how do you've got a very intransigent Israeli leadership. You've created a situation where you've got, several million refugees, multi-generational refugee system. The the level of hatred and resentment between the parties is such that it's going to be very difficult to come up with any kind of an acceptable stabilizing solution. You can maybe, through enough application of enough force, maybe beat people back down to the point where they're not actively resisting. But again, does that pop back up in 6 months or a year or whatever? The long-term solutions are very difficult here. You can go back to at the end of World War One with between Turkey and Greece, where there was an exchange of populations, and you had stabilization that way. But that's the UN resolutions around Israel are just the opposite because they guarantee a right of return and all of that. So we've structurally created a situation in the Middle East where it's intractable. There isn't, I don't know where there's a solution because neither side really, everybody talks about the so-called two-state solution, but neither side accepts that. They both want a one-state solution. So I don't know, other than coming in with overwhelming force, separating the parties, and giving it enforcing a peace at the point of the gun for at least a generation or two. How do you solve this? I don't know,
But
and we don't have that time.
even if you did solve that, what happens with Iran, Iraq, and all of the Saudi Arabia and all of the oil nations, the nations who have the oil that the world uses under their land? How do you solve avert them from getting involved? Let me ask you this. And I'm really curious as to your answer. So I often say that I got my master's in business from the University of Chicago, and the word energy was never mentioned in the 2 years I was there. I've been talking with you a lot in the last few years, and so I know you've had really good calls and are on top of this situation. Yet, since the Israel Hamas situation started on October 7th, the long term oil futures are up like $2 or $2.50, like 6, 7, 8 years out. And the short term is up like $4. Like, and the stock market is actually up since this happened. So, uh, most people with voting with their dollars strongly disagree with the risks that you've just outlined. Well, why is that?
Risk homeostasis. We've gotten away for the last 30 years with ignoring the Middle East for practical purposes. And okay, there's an occasional flare up, 2006 Lebanon war. Okay, yeah, there's some terrorism, blah, blah. But as you say, the spice still flows. The oil is still coming. So I think people tend to, they think, well, we muddled through last time, we'll muddle through this time. And that's where we have the hard task here. Is it different this time? Because it's going to be different at one point. You're going to run out of road at some point, and the people who say that, well, we'll figure it out. What's different this time? Well, for one thing, we've blown up the whole energy connection with Russia, which has, we've discussed, such a huge influence. You look at, my God, the Wahhabi Sunni leadership of Saudi Arabia is talking hourly, daily, if not hourly, with the Shia radical, quote unquote, Islam, radical leadership of Iran. How that has never happened. So if you're talking about coordination between the different oil producing countries, um, and they have other markets too. You've got now, China's coming in willing to pay for resources. You've got the rest of the world is, we're not the biggest market anymore. We're on the downside of that. People don't need the West anymore, is where this is headed. And once that critical mass happens, I think it'll fall apart very quickly.